In Renfield, Dracula's familiar finds a new lease on life in modern-day New Orleans when he falls in love with a traffic cop and decides to finally stand up to his master. What's up, my dude? Your friendly neighborhood Tony here, and I just got back from watching the new Nick Cage and Nicholas Hoult comedy horror movie, Renfield. So I wanted to jump on real quick, let you know all the good, the bad, and ultimately whether or not I recommend you check it out yourself. If that kind of thing sounds good to you and you want to see more movie reviews just like this, make sure you subscribe. All right, so let's get started with just some basic details about the movie. Renfield, as I mentioned, is a horror/comedy movie that is directed by McKay. You might know him from directing the Lego Batman movie or more recently, The Tomorrow War starring Chris Pratt, that I think I remember went straight to Amazon. Also, this movie is based on a story, or at least a concept of a story that was created by Robert Kirkman, who also brought us a couple of smaller, lesser known things, The Walking Dead and also Invincible. So, okay, a pretty good pedigree as far as where the story is coming from. And as I mentioned before, it stars Nick Cage as Dracula and Nicholas Hoult, who has been in a ton of things, including About a Boy, which is the first thing I ever saw him in, Warm Bodies, and I think most recently, The Menu. He plays Renfield, which is basically Dracula's lackey. Now, as I do with all my reviews, I'm going to go over some of the pros, the things that I really liked about the movie, followed by the cons, the things I did not like at all, and then wrap it all up with who I would recommend this movie to, if anyone. The first thing that really stands out to me as far as the positives are going to be Nicholas Hoult and Nick Cage's performances. I feel like Nick Cage is one of those actors that you either absolutely love or maybe you just don't get. And if you are in the former of that and are somebody who loves Nick Cage as much as I do, then you are going to adore him as Dracula in this movie. I've heard that for a long time he's wanted to play Dracula, and in this movie they allow him to just go full on Nick Cage with nothing held back. You might say he really gets to sink his teeth into this character. I'm sorry, I couldn't make it through a whole review without making a terrible pun, and that's on me. But yes, Nick Cage is fantastic. He is totally over the top, so do not go into this thinking that he is playing it seriously. He is really leaning into the campy nature of especially the older ideas of Dracula. If you go back and watch some of the older black and white films, he is very much leaning into that, except of course with a more modern vibes. And so because of that, you can really kind of see how maybe dated some of those ideas of Dracula are. He just does such a good job of being a little scary, but also ridiculous and laughable. Then, of course, you have Nicholas Hoult, who I love and have loved for a very long time. I think he's a great actor. He does a really good job in this movie of being completely pitiable. As you can imagine, his character Renfield is a servant of Dracula who is just really beat down and just crapped on by Dracula constantly. And Nicholas Hoult does such a good job of portraying that just pitiful nature, but in a way that you really feel for him, and also in a way that you're still kind of drawn to him, right? Like, don't get it twisted. Nicholas Hoult is 6'3", good looking, in shape, and so you're still gonna feel like he's a good leading man. But in addition to just being that, he plays this character in a way that you just really feel for him. Aside from Nick Cage and Nicholas Hoult, the action in this movie is insane. If you've seen the trailers for it, then you've seen some of the over-the-top, wild, gory, violent action that they go through. But I will tell you, that is nothing compared to what you actually see in the movie. So if you are into crazy hand-to-hand combat that's just way over the top, beyond anything realistic, if you want to see dudes getting their heads ripped off or their arms ripped off and then beaten with their arms, there's so much more. If you want to see that, if you're into that over-the-top, ridiculous, action-packed, gory, bloody violence, gory and bloody to the point of being comedic, then this is absolutely the movie for you. I also really enjoy what they did with the story in that this movie is about not just a servant of Dracula, but it is about a guy who is in a very toxic relationship. And they definitely play on that. You've probably seen it in some of the trailers where they have Renfield going to a meeting for people who are dealing with narcissists. And the movie really revolves around that a fair bit. And I really like it. I like how they did that. For a movie that's so crazy and ridiculous and over the top and unbelievable, I think it really grounds it in a sense of reality. Obviously not entirely, but enough to where you can actually get something out of it aside from just the enjoyment of seeing something crazy on screen. So yeah, those are the big pros with the movie. Nick Cage, Nicholas Hoult, the action, the ridiculous over-the-top gore, and then some of the story itself, but there are definitely some cons, so let's get into those. And I feel like my cons are going to revolve around, honestly, a particular character and their story, and that is with Awkwafina. Now, full disclosure, I've only ever seen Awkwafina in a handful of movies, so I don't know how good of an actress she necessarily is. I can only go off of the few movies that I've seen her in. And to me, she really feels like one of the actors, or rather one of the rappers that acted in the early Fast and the Furious movies. You know, shout out to Ja Rule. What I mean by that is that she's a likable person, and so it feels like that's why they're throwing her in movies. And when she's in those movies, she just kind of reads her lines and either puts a smile on her face or sneers depending on what the line is. But I'm not really seeing any depth to her acting ability or to the characters that she plays. She pretty much plays the same person in all the movies I've seen. So I guess if you've seen Awkwafina in a movie where she really gets to stretch her acting muscles, definitely let me know in the comments. Because right now, the few that I can think of, I don't know why she's in these movies. And I don't mean to be crapping on her, right? She seems great, but especially in this movie, her whole arc just felt kind of unnecessary. I don't want to spoil anything about what happens with her, but it feels like it was just there to kind of waste time. And in fact, without her whole story arc, I feel like the movie would have been much more compelling and interesting. I feel like when you take the focus off of Renfield and Dracula and their relationship, it kind of loses its way and just becomes a whatever movie that we've seen a dozen times. And the movie suffers for that. It's only a 90-minute movie, so an hour and a half, but probably 30 to 40 minutes of that movie is time spent on something that ultimately doesn't really matter, or at least doesn't serve the main purpose of the movie and the reason why we're there to watch it. Also, something strange I noticed, speaking of Awkwafina and her role in the movie, in all of the advertising and all of the plot summaries that you're going to read online, it says that Renfield, because he fell in love with Awkwafina's character, gained the strength to break free of Dracula. There is almost no romantic chemistry at all in this movie between Renfield and Awkwafina's character. In fact, the majority of the time, there was maybe one moment where it seems like, oh, she might be into him. And then they just fall into like best friend mode for the entirety of the movie, which again is fine. You can totally do that. But then why would you advertise it as the reason that he is able to break free of Dracula is because he falls in love with her? And then there's no kind of romantic interest there at all the entire movie. It just felt odd. I don't know if maybe it was something that was done in editing. I could see that. Perhaps like they shot the movie with that intention, but then when they got in the editing room, realized there was no chemistry between those two actors. And so they kind of worked around it. I don't know. That's just one of my theories. It's possible. Let me know what you think though in the comments. So all in all, to sum it all up, this movie lives and dies by the Nicholas's performances, whether it's Nick Cage or Nicholas Hoult. The core story, the main plot about being in a toxic relationship with Dracula is very compelling and fun and interesting and something unique. But then the movie spends a lot of time getting bogged down in things that just don't really matter or didn't really interest me. But if you think that watching Nicolas Cage going completely insane playing Dracula is fun, or if you're just into some ridiculously over-the-top and comedically violent bloodshed, you're in luck. All in all, I did enjoy the movie Renfield. I just wish I was able to get more out of it. So if you don't fall into the previous category that I mentioned, you might want to wait for this movie to come out on streaming. Otherwise, definitely get out to the theater to watch Renfield. But of course, these are just my thoughts, my opinions. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you've seen Renfield, did you like it? Did you not like it? Also, if you want to support me and the channel here real quick, the only way to do that at this time is through my Amazon affiliate link. I'm just a tiny little channel, so I'm not yet monetized. So if you want to support me, just scroll down to the description box below. There's an Amazon affiliate link. If you plan on buying anything on Amazon today, just go through that link. It doesn't cost you anything extra and it just gives me a little kickback. So if you do, I appreciate it. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next one. All right. Be good.